Okay, Dr. Bill is with us Monday this week. He has a very busy schedule later on, so we pulled him up earlier in the schedule, and he's with us this hour. Hello, Bill. How are you?
Lots of stuff to talk about.
Oh, let me start off with some whoppers here. You're going to love
I'm
this.
sure you have some whoppers.
We have been watching the mind control, absolutely the most sophisticatedly exacting science of mass mind control and social engineering for years. We knew they had supercomputer models. We know that they've been studying Bernays, and it's advanced, tenfold since then. We know that Tavistock was the big key, and it still is playing a key role. But it's all about genetics now. And we know also that Google, the Google wives, even though one of the husbands was apparently unfaithful, the Google wives are involved in genetic research. They're involved with modifying DNA. Now, here's a great one. Scientists identify gene which controls memory extinction. Think about that one. So they can give you something in the water. Yes, you got it. The spotless mind is coming. And this is a whopper. These things are going to be little nano things. They'll be put in the water or the air or the food, whatever. They'll go in. They'll take up residence in your mind, wherever they need to be in the body. They'll do their thing, and we'll truly have happy zombies. Idiots. We're here. George Orwell wouldn't believe it. He would. I always say something else.
Well, if you teleported him forward to our day, he said, I can't write that because no one will believe it in my day.
Yeah, well, there he is. Here's another little kind of a medical thing for you. As we know, there are in California 65 vaccines given, and I forget how many are in the pipeline there. Scientists discover blueprint for universal flu vaccine. Another winner, folks. They're going to I don't know how anyone's going to live past the age of 25. Well, they'll be happy if they die young. It doesn't matter because they'll have the spotless mind. Anyway, go ahead. What's up?
Well, the first thing that's happened is that we're detecting from my contact and here on my detector, the highest levels of radiation I've ever seen for 2.5 years since Fukushima. That means there was a major release last week after the typhoon when they released at least 1,000. You can multiply that by whatever your imagination believes.
Okay, now what I want to say, though, excuse me, let me interrupt. Bill lives in Southern California, for all of you who may not know, in the San Diego area, which you would think,
Marine Corps base.
Which you would think would have a very low average background. Should be 25 to 30.
Right, we don't even have San Onofre anymore. It's shut down.
Right. So you think that Bill's background counts per minute would be 35, 35, somewhere around there. Go ahead.
Yeah, before the Fukushima, it was around 25. Now it was running around, in the last few months, around 75, well, 3 times background. It used to be for the first 2 years of Fukushima, around 60. Now it's been running 75, and just the last 48 hours, it's gone to 100 and 120. That's when the doors were open. When the doors were closed, this happened on Sunday, I thought, oh. And we noticed that because it's fall, the wind changes direction, coming from the north primarily now rather than the south. We had a monsoon last week that was just ending, and radiation levels were relatively low in the 40s, 50s, a little lower than average. When the wind swung around from the north, wow, and it wasn't raining. We had a little rain about 3 or 4 days ago before the surge. So it doesn't have to be in the rain. Now, if you have rain, it really pulls it down, but it doesn't necessarily pull it down here. It can be over St. Louis or Austin, Texas, where the jet stream tends to track. It can be in Eastern Europe. And it can also, by the way, those radiation streams can go over the pole, transpolar to Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, anywhere, China. And we always think that the air currents flow in the wrong direction, but there's cyclonic currents that carry it back over China. So within a week of the March 11th, 2011 nuclear disaster at Fukushima, they detected radiation in 22 provinces in China. The Chinese are no slouches because they built up in the last few years 35 new reactors. So they knew it wasn't their reactors. These are brand new reactors. So they knew there wasn't a breakdown, and they controlled those reactors. So what we're having, this disaster is starting to really get ahead of steam on. And their current plan is to put a cooling you want to basically freeze the area, make a deep freeze in the ground, is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Or the idea of pulling fuel rod assemblies when they now know it's publicly reported that the fuel rod assemblies have had a breakdown in the borinated rubber, so there's no actual decrease in neutron flux around any of these fuel rod assemblies. They're bent, so they can't be pulled out freely. They have to be cut, which will start a pyrophoric fire. So we're up on it. What we're facing now is the background count for radiation is going to start climbing in bumps. And as it climbs, you're going to start seeing sea life die. You're going to start seeing bioaccumulation in people. And most people aren't aware of chronic radiation sickness. What do you think happens if people get chronic radiation sickness?
Well, they get cancer in many cases, and they die.
That's long before they get cancer. Cancer is basically an end stage. If you live long enough, you
they start to manifest all kinds of different illnesses.
Yeah, the first thing they do is they get confusion and they get memory disorders.
Well,
they can get numbness and polyneuropathy and vertigo.
Right.
They can get problems with pancytopenia, where their white cell count and the red cell count and everything drops, or hemoglobin. They can get radiation-induced visual problems, seeing and hearing. They can get problems with cutaneous lesions, like gum lesions, lesions on their skin. They can get leukocytosis, where the white cell count drops, and you start to end up with weird infections in funny places. You wouldn't expect that somebody's like terminal or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Treatment, of course, is things like hyperbaric oxygen and chelating agents, and of course things like Nutridyne and Nutritrel to stop free radicals. Because once you irradiate tissue, the tissue itself starts to die. Set off what's called a death signal, which makes other tissues and mitochondria release massive amounts of free radicals. It's like a grass fire. Once the death signal starts to release in tissues start to get necrotic really quickly. So,
by the way, it's been proven that the death signature, the photonic death signature, will be actually picked up and followed by healthy tissue.
Right, but it also is not just across. It's not just across what I call it. Healthy tissue in the same person. People don't realize we are like cells in a multicellular organism, mankind.
Uh-huh.
So it's going to actually occur across society. That death signal will happen on a psychological, and a interpersonal and a physiological level.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is dying cells emit photons of a certain signature, and healthy tissue will pick it up and die, even though they're not necessarily infected with the same pathogen. It doesn't matter. My background up here is running 32 to 40, right around in there.
Yeah, well, you're relatively lucky right now. What happens is during the summer, the radiation tends to flow more northerly, and as we head toward the fall and winter, the radiation stream in the air, at least the troposphere, carries it further south. So,
you mentioned one thing. Let me go back to this.
Yeah.
This asinine, absurd ice wall the Japanese continue to talk about is so unrealistic and stupid. What they've done is they put a barrier in there, and they've actually rebounded some of the water back up in and under Fukushima Daiichi. Accordingly, the rains that recently fell from the typhoon, 17 inches on average, and the backing up of the groundwater now, not to mention the water being poured on what's left of the reactors on the top, and the leaking tanks, which are spraying all over the workers who walk next to some of them, I understand. Tanks which were so poorly assembled that the workers didn't even tighten the bolts around the bottom plates of these tanks. That's crazy. So anyway, the point is, as Arnie Gunderson said, and we've been saying it actually long before Arnie did, the plant itself, built on fill, is sitting on basically a big bowl of mud.
Radioactive mud.
Correct.
Yeah, and by the way, the corium, if it bumps together, it's like a lava lamp, and when the corium or radioisotopes bump together, you get a big surge in neutron flux and a big surge in gamma rays. And in fact, you can actually see at night literally spikes of gamma rays shooting up neutron flux. It creates,
seen
what it does is ionizes the nitrogen in the air, and you see a blue light spike, almost like Star Wars, like a light show.
Very interesting. Here's another quickie. Woods Hole, of course, very well known around the world, prestigious Oceanographic Institute. Ken Buessler was interviewed, senior scientist there. He said, there are some engineering proposals to try to divert the water, that's the underground water coming from the mountains flowing under the plant and becoming irradiated as it passes through the melted through cores, or block the water. It's very hard to dam a river because it's going to go around the dam or over the dam or under the dam. They're having the same problems between the reactors and the ocean at Fukushima, and now they're talking about an even larger engineering structure. 1 kilometer ice dams, freezing the soil essentially to divert water around the site. That might reduce the total number of tanks you need, but it doesn't necessarily stop the leaks at all, because they still will be applying water to cool those reactors and the spent fuel pools.
They're trying to divert the aquifers, what they're trying to do, but
can't do it.
Don't say that the basic problem is two enemies: water and neutrons.
Water is the heavyweight champ. It goes where it wants to go, ultimately.
Right, and the neutrons are the other one that they don't realize, that if you have a chlorine mutant, you can't stop the neutrons. You're going to continue to have critical reactions.
Correct.
And the water, of course, is bad, because when the zirconium doesn't have any cladding around it, you're going to get hydrogen production.
Well,
you're going to have hydrogen explosion.
All the fuel assemblies, you told me the cladding is all but gone.
Yeah, it's all turned into dust and vaporized away.
Yeah. All right. Now, hold on, Bill. We have to pause just a second, please. We'll come right back. All right. Back with Dr. Bill and all you folks in just a minute. Okay, right back with you and Dr. Bill. Okay, Bill, go ahead.
One of the things that both you and I, we call news junkies, but we're much more than that. We're, in a sense, spiritual teachers trying to get people to believe the truth. The truth is actually pretty biting. If people don't have hope, the truth actually is like a death sentence. That's why I describe things like the Bible. The Bible is a autopsy report, set of indictments, and a death sentence to those who don't have hope. Now, if you have hope, it means you have to have a relationship with the Creator of the universe. And I want to teach people a few things that are part of that 90% that I usually don't talk about, because our current world basically is a pretty godless world. Even the so-called people that are churched or believe in some form of social agnosticism or atheism or transhumanism, they don't really believe in a transcendent creator or that we're a higher order being. They believe that we're, in a sense, the mechanization of the human creature, that we're advanced biological machines that are either evolving or soon going to control our evolution through genetics, which is just plain stupid. Human beings are more than a physical being. And if you were to ask the questions from astrobiologists or astrophysicists, they'll tell you that the equations tell you that there's hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy alone that could support life over 1 trillion years. And that, in fact, it's very likely that if you look at a cosmos with roughly 460 trillion galaxies, at least in our known universe, the number of civilizations that could exist could be hundreds of billions that are advanced beyond the level in which they've extinguished life and they have some advanced intelligence. Now, I know a lot of people have a parochial view that their little local religion on Earth, whatever that is the do-all and end-all of the Creator of the universe, but they really would be very mistaken. The God of the universe is a very large God, a God who can incarnate as Yeshua HaMashiach, the Father in the flesh here, can be bring the witness of truth in any other world, and bring the truth to other beings, both the humanoid and non-humanoid, across the vast galaxy and the vast universe. Our universe is being watched, as it says right through the Bible, any ancient holy book, but our Bible is the clearest evidence by advanced beings. I mean, everywhere through the Bible, it tells you that we have interacted with fallen ones, or Nephilim, advanced beings we call angels, which just means messengers, and beings that have creative power or destructive power that's far beyond the imagination of the human. The problem is that people don't understand that our civilization has been steered by these beings, both good and evil, throughout our history. It's not something that's new to the 21st century or 20th century, where people start to pay attention to strange craft or beings just appearing. The fact is that people have known intuitively, even ancient or native cultures, that there's a hyperdimensional spirit world, that there's a reality beyond the current parochial reality we have. And very few people have glimpsed that unless they've died and come back. Some have a very brief experience of that. Others have a much more extensive one. I'm one of those ones that had a much more extensive one. And some of the things that I can't talk about many of the things, but I will talk about a few. The first thing, I want to give people hope. The earth will not be abandoned to the wicked. I hear a lot of people saying the earth is, bound for destruction. No, the earth is in destruction right now. We're about to be rescued. We're about to have an intervention. And we're not talking about ET intervention. We're talking about something far more advanced than that. We're talking about the angels or the witnesses, the beings of the Most High God, are going to intervene on earth because mankind has proven repeatedly he's incapable of rescuing himself. at the very least, a tiny minority get it, and the vast majority are becoming less and less conscious. In fact, if anything, they're becoming almost like cybernetic machines fused to their cell phone or their iPad or their HDTV or their computer, and they really don't literally sense things with their spirit, interact with living things, including each other or the living world around them, or harmonically or connected as multicellular beings to other human beings where they have any empathy. That's why we carry out social policies of get those serious or blast those people because they're different skin color or race or group, when in fact they're different cells of the same body. And human beings have been under observation. People don't realize that we are constantly being under surveillance, and that surveillance is by the angelic hosts that are watching to see what will be done, and if it will be done, and if the particular criteria to do something are met, which is required by, we want to call it cosmic law, the law of the Most High God. Those people who are godless have no hope. They think it's a mechanistic world where everything is chaos, everything decays to nothing, and there's no future. Well, they'd be totally wrong. Now, the soul, which is the transdimensional portion, is not what you call eternal, but it's much more that it's called superimmortal. In other words, it exists much longer, just like the superimmortal beings that are infesting this world in the minds of the so-called leaders of our world, which in many cases, the best way to describe them would be the Middle Ages term of demonically possessed. I like to refer to them as being transdimensionally avatared by super intelligent, dark intelligences that are either memes or actual beings that control our global elite. They've been bred to be controlled, like avataring a robot from a distance. They've been bred specifically to be controlled, and most of them are the product of Reiki and mind control, sex magic rituals, and human breeding to create basically a physical, you want to call biological machine, to be controlled to be the avatars that rule our world. People might find this hard to believe, but it's true. And what that does, it puts us in a position where if you know the truth will set you free. But most of the public religions, including Christianity, who should know this better than anyone, don't really want to preach this. They want to preach what I call milk and cookies gospel.
Well, that's easy sell.
Right, and they don't. Even if you want the ancient Hebrews, but they did instead of learning the truth. And Barry Shamish, who's a Jew himself, would say this, that half of the Jews started to follow centuries ago Japhetites and Jakob Frank, who basically anti-messiahs that were bringing a gospel of Satanism. And I've said this before, but every public religion on earth, including secular humanism, agnosticism, socialism, transhumanism, are all different versions on the shelf of the superstore of Satan. The relationship with the Creator God is essential, and without a relationship, you can't decide what's good or evil. And the problem is, without connectedness, without these simple principles that a child like my daughter with Down syndrome can understand, you can't do good. You can't connect with each other. You wouldn't do evil if you have a connectedness. You wouldn't do evil to the great whales. You wouldn't allow pollution. And also, we have a creative intent. The reason why the world is dying is because we collectively have accepted the death sentence that we've passed on ourselves by willing that we should die. And they don't realize that our sins, which includes a collective sin of disconnectedness, is causing us to literally will ourselves into oblivion. That doesn't need to be. Every person that's listening to this message now needs to know that God has sent witnesses back from the dead, such as me, to tell people there is hope. When we see Fukushima, when we see a war in the Middle East about to happen, when we see the dollar about to crash, when we see the world dying from ultraviolet light from geoengineering, when we see biological weapons about to be released in airborne plague, all of the horrors of the worst movies like World War Z and something are nothing compared to what's coming. But our Creator God is greater. And you need to have hope.
Let's hope so. Sounds logical to me.
I'll get more when we get back. But
it's
important that people have hope, because what I see is the crushing truth of all these things makes people tune out, and just die.
Well, they withdraw, of course.
They withdraw and they die. And that's part of the reason why they don't do anything. Right. They don't intend to overcome this.
We're up against, remember, as I said, we're up against an exact science of mass mind control and social engineering. But
what I'm saying, the solution is beyond mind. The mind is deceived, so it's like in martial arts, you have to not let the body or the mind deceive you. You have to.
Oh, indeed. Well, the mind is the computer, but we've got a real mind somewhere else.
Exactly. You've got your soul, which is beyond the mind.
Yeah. All right. Hold on. We'll be right back. Talking to Dr. Bill on a Monday this week. Glad you're along on the 23rd of September. One more Monday to go, and that's it. Then it's Halloween month. Don't forget our Halloween contest. Let me remind folks, Bill, just for a second. Brad Steiger and Jeff every year have a Halloween contest, Best Ghost Story, Real Story, and Best Halloween Splash Art. So you artists and story writers are invited to participate. And you know the drill, most of you. It's right there on the home page at Rense.com. You'll see it. A lot of fun. Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Actually, I'll take a little word off that. You know where the Halloween comes from? All Hallows Eve, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And, of course, it's supposed to be when the spirit world and the physical world come so close together that the dead can literally make contact.
There's a big bleed-through.
The big bleed-through, yeah. In other words, the trans-dimensional bleed-through. In sense, it's a time when portals occur. And it's actually a prophetic time for the fallen ones. There will be a great time of transition into the physical world where they'll take over. And that's why a great battle is about to happen. People can feel it. They can feel it in their spirits. They can see that. And a lot of people, because they don't have any real faith, they have what I call churched, or they have what I call the latte church. It's good to take off the Laodicean church.
I like that.
But it occurs in pretty well every religion. Unfortunately, whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, agnosticism, whatever, just, footballism, you can take the word ism and add it to it. And one of the poisons is the idea of consensus and the idea of tolerance. The problem is tolerance and consensus disappear when you have full truth. Full truth, basically bans, destroys all the idea of consensus and tolerance. Because there's only one truth. There's not multiple truths. There may be some partial versions of it, but the practice there only is really one truth. The problem is our world is suffering because of not just untruth, but I call distruth, where people make something look like it has the appearance of truth, but it's used to manipulate the population. They're even showing things that look evil on purpose, or look good on purpose, so they can manipulate the population. And what I see happening is more and more the population is getting more unconscious. And with the poisoning of the world, with radiotoxins, fluorotoxins, things that bind up, for example, fluoride binds up the magnetite particles in their pineal gland and the basal nuclei, the caudate putamen nucleus, and the pineal.
Right.
So the basal nuclei are actually attached to the cord of living waters that attach to their soul. That's the actual physical, anatomical place in the brain that attaches to the cord of living waters, or what's called in the Bible the silver cord. Now, people would say that's foolish. No, it isn't. There's an anatomical location to it. And it fits in with the, quote, chakra points that we talk about in Hinduism. But everybody knows this, because anybody who's intuitive and has second sight can see the aura around someone if they're a healer, whether they're a native shaman or an MD or a nurse.
Especially children.
Especially children. And basically the childlike qualities are kept or restored in people who've had near-death experiences. I personally was pronounced dead on arrival at birth, and I died and went to the place of the eternal now. And if it was lineal time, because there's no time in heaven, the place is eternal now. There's no past, present, or future. It's eternity.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been what I spent time.
You actually were pronounced dead formally at birth?
Yeah, I was a footling breach, and the cord in the leg popped out, and the surgeon, Dr. Ollies at the Providence Hospital, pushed the cord in the leg back up and delivered me. He was going to do a craniotomy to crush my skull to save my mother's life.
Oh,
my father threatened if he did it, he would terminate him before he got out of the operating room. So because he had studied my father was pretty smart, but his sister was an obstetrician nurse and an RN, and he had read her book and realized that what this Dr. Ollies was planning to doing. And when they delivered me DOA and had me last rites off to the coffin, ready to go.
Gee.
And I came back, and they said, well, he'll probably die in the ICU because he's got such severe brain damage, certainly. There's no way he'll survive, but I did. And then at 8.5, I had a French surgeon do a tonsillectomy on me at the Colchester County Hospital in Nova Scotia, because my mother was American, my father was Canadian. And the surgeon pulled the tonsil forward and a big artery in my neck and lacerated the artery, and I bled to death. And I remember floating off the operating room table.
What an idiot.
Down. Yeah, well, it happens. Doctors do idiot. Basically, when doctors go on strike, people don't die. So, as much as doctors do some good, obviously, and I know what they do good, what they don't. That's why I was medical legal doc for years as well. But anyway, I went down the tunnel of light, the Crimson Line, and I met the Most High God, and I spent what would be in lineal time, the equivalent of, because there is no time, the number of experience would take a normal person through life, multiple lifetimes, probably equivalent to 500 years. So I know a lot of things. Most of them I don't talk to anybody about because they're so fantastic that people wouldn't understand it. In terms of quantum physics, the nature of the universe, matter, the number of beings across the universe, the number of things that I know that other people are starting to get over the last decade. I was born in 1952, 61. So they're starting to have a little inkling of it because it's percolating through. Because remember, I think of me like a retinal cell in the fovea, the center of the eye. I see and know things that other people just, vaguely see through the side of their soul. I see it clear as crystal clear. And I can only speak about some things because it's not time. But it is time to say to the people, don't lose hope. And, my ancestor was Moses and Aaron. In the 8th century, they were taken away by the Medo-Persians to Esfahan, northern Iran, and my ancestor married the daughter of the king of the Medes. Took on the tribal name called Naimi, or Naima, and they were one of the head Cohens of the 24 family cycle. In the 1st century, my ancestor received a direct prophecy from Jesus that one in the family line of the Naima family would be a witness for the final end of the age. Not the end of the world, because the world would not be ending or abandoned to the wicked or destroyed. People always hear all these things of what's going to be destroyed. The world would be made new. What people need to understand is there's going to be a great die-off, not just physically, but spiritually. A lot of people, they're uncertain.
And, I might want to add one thing there. It may not be a sudden die-off. I think we're really seeing it right now.
We're seeing some of the die-off now, but there's going to be a pace of spasms of die-off.
Kind of like spasms of emissions of nuclear death from Fukushima.
Yeah, in Fukushima, Mideast War, starvation because of a stall of the world economy, which would kill a lot of, millions of people per week. Starvation. But I want people to know that person who was prophesied in the 1st century, passed it down in writing to my great uncle who died 30 years ago, told me this when I was 14. That person that's that witness is me. I'm here to tell people to have hope, not to abandon hope, because they see the terror coming. They don't have eyes to see the terror, they'll be just taken away. They won't prepare physically or spiritually for what's coming. And they will be in such a stark state of shock and anguish. Not just physical, but spiritual. They'll give up all hope in any religion that they have or any relationship with the Creator. What they need to do now is build themselves up for what's coming. It's going to be something else.
Hot time in the old town. All right.
Nothing like it ever in the past or ever shall happen again.
Agreed. I think we're headed toward that kind of an event, exactly. Be right back with Dr. Bill in just a minute. Okay, we're back with Bill. Twice dead, but still kicking. All right.
It's still kicking. We have a few days left in the Feast of Tabernacles, and of course the tabernacle really is our body. Our body is the tabernacle, and when, of course, I'm a hyper empath. People that know my show, and they do test with me like the QRMA test.
Well, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
And of course, if you're a hyper empath, it means you're also going to be empathic and connected to the Creator. You can't not be, I tell spirituality trumps religion. I call religion real lives going on. Ceremony and icons and other things are not my bag. I believe that there are holy days of ancient Hebrew, and we're not talking about Jewish, we're talking about Hebrew. Most of modern Judaism is basically either secular humanism or Satanism, unfortunately. But God's going to bring back a portion of the so-called Jews. Most people don't realize the state of Israel is not a religious state. It's a secular agnostic, it's a satanic communist state. There are a small seed, like a mustard seed, of real Torah believers. There's a mustard seed of real Christians, whether even some of them even Khazarians that accepted the Creator God into their life, and their spiritual DNA is what counts, not their physical DNA. And I know a lot of people think that the covenant of having the right DNA makes you have the right to the land of the Middle East, and that's not the case. In fact, if you read the Bible correctly, and I mentioned this when I had Tex Mars on my program, the very fact is actually wonderful what he did, because the very fact that he proved that the Khazars, they're primarily Satanists and communists that run the state of Israel now for the globalists, don't have a genetic right, proves the only relationship which will bring them back to the right to the land is that they have a relationship with the Most High God and repent of Satanism. Same with the Islamic people. They're 87% genetically have a heritage of ancient Hebrews, but yet haven't accepted the Creator God and are in the satanic religion of Islam. And there's lots of other satanic religions, including many different strains of Christianity, transhumanism, secular agnosticism, thousands of isms, and I call the superstore of Satan. The problem is our world is not going to come to an end, but it's going to come to an abrupt stop. And on the merry-go-round of the world, many people are not just going to suffer a physical death because they think that their soul is eternal. The soul is temporal. It will pass. If they want to get a vision of the abyss, and I've had one about 25 years ago when I was bringing back a patient from an attempted suicide, it's like observing someone with the agitation of the fire separated from their Creator, falling in the dark into nothingness and fading forever. That's what hell is. It's not pleasant. If you have a vision of how many people will go there, if you don't yourself get a connection, it gives you an urgency with why it's so important to preserve not only physical health in our world, but also spiritual health. Because if people have a relationship, they wouldn't do the things they do. We'd have a better monetary system, healthcare system, political system. We wouldn't have a district of criminals or psychotics.
Right.
We wouldn't have a religion with phony pastors.
Well, the whole look, the idea of organized religions, whether they're large or small, is without question the most evil, damnable thing that this species has ever had forced upon it.
Well, how many churches do you think want Dr. Deagle to come to their church? Now, I didn't go to a pastor's school or seminary or anywhere else. I went to the seminary of a relationship, both good, but cleansing my sin and dealing with me as an individual and making me have a total realization of the abject level of what we are, which is I call 10th level maggots, who can be sanctified and become decent human beings so that we're not only don't destroy our civilization, but can join the collective of civilizations across the cosmos and become advanced beings that don't die, like, as it says in the book of Ecclesiastes, who is man who is mowed down like grass, rises in the morning and at night is gone. Man shouldn't die at 70 years. Man shouldn't suffer disease. We shouldn't see our relatives and friends disappear. We shouldn't have broken relationships and sexually transmitted diseases and sexual perversions. We shouldn't have a toxic world where everyone doesn't even have a chance to even be born, where they're killed in the most dangerous place for a black man is in his mother's womb, or a black child 7 times more likely to be aborted. We shouldn't have a worry where you have a granny after contributing her whole life for granddad. He goes to a healthcare system where the hospital calculates out the cost of his care and decides it's time to give him a bathtub of narcotics or a lethal injection, or just not even to give him proper care. Or doctors who innovate new care at less costs or try to actually fix the problem become considerable pariahs, and the authorities, which are powered by the blood of Satan himself, decide that the standards of care, even if it means murder, must be upheld, even if it results in the mass death of patients.
Let me ask you to do. Let's just do a big reverse zoom here, and look at the big picture. How would you quantify the overall ethics of this species and its controllers now, and where is it going? I already know the answer, so do you. And most
the answer
too,
is that mankind, if we are watched by a cosmos of angelic beings that serve the Most High God, look down at us as in a boat to be plague, like stars to a boat to leap from Saudi Arabia, i.e. Earth, across the cosmos and destroy worlds. And if mankind doesn't get spiritually more advanced, so there are technologies at our feet and not at our head. So we're not engineered by the evil in our heart to decide what kind of genetic enhancement we want to become super beings. In a physical way, machines, rather than spiritually advanced beings, they can live not only with each other, but across the other sentient beings in our world, but also across the cosmos. that we need to not be steered by transdimensional entities, otherwise known as Nephilim or fallen ones or angelic beings that decided to see their own ego or their dragon. We're a plague. Mankind, basically, it's like Circus Maximus, and it has been before the council a number of times. I've been there 3 times, and I can tell you that the world is hanging in the balance of whether or not it'll be thumb.
I believe it. Humankind, human beings, do not inhabit the planet; they infest it. It's an infestation.
Right, they're an infestation. Now there are a few of us. We're like the few righteous men. Yourself, Jeff, you're like a spiritual leader. I'm a spiritual leader. We're there trying to raise the level of consciousness high enough that the Creator of the universe will not release full destructive force upon our world. And I can tell you how many times we've been rescued back from a nuclear holocaust. 39 years ago, there was a major one. I talked to my friend Colonel Lynn Wells, who's head of U.S. Space Command Strategic Defense, who would start sequence for Huey after the launch on command sequence.
Yeah.
And he personally knew about at least 3 or 4 times during either his term or the previous 20 years.
If we've been gotten away, we're on borrowed time.
And by the way, this wasn't just accidents that were averted. These are supernatural interventions. We're talking about, we're literally waiting. There's on bated breath. And again, I'm going to tell you what will happen next. We're on the verge of destruction. And what we're going to have next is we're moving quickly toward a biometric world system called the Mark of the Beast. And that Mark of the Beast, by the way, is going to come from America. Managed by the European banks, but it's coming from America. Number 2, we're heading toward a peace treaty, which will stutter the destruction and then temporarily make people believe in a false peace and a dialectic between these very disparate religions of satanic Islam, satanic Judaism, and satanic Catholicism as a super religion that everyone must believe in that accepts some very bizarre, conflicting, and stupid dogma. And they want to basically paralyze religion and destroy it, and basically make people kind of, if you want to call it biological machines, willing to be manipulated by a globalist agenda that tracks every move you make and everything you do, like the song Sting. Then, of course, in the middle of that period, and there'll be a ceiling of those who really get it. The ceiling of, it says in the Bible, 144,000. It's not an absolute number. A ceiling of people who are raised to the level of consciousness where they really get it. Because when you do, you have the power to create. You have the power to create a new world, a new life, and a new world. We're not victims. We're co-creators. We're co-creators of our own future. And that's the biggest thing that has been robbed from us. We've received a pottage. And our real destiny is to be co-creators of our world and our cosmos. That's what our destiny is. As Jesus himself said, surely you know that you are also gods. Did greater things in the name of the Father you shall do than I did? I mean, how can you do greater than raising the dead? Well, guess what? That's the word from him, Father in the flesh. What I got to tell people is they need to stop having no hope. They need to stop believing the milk and cookie gospel of the so-called churches. They need to start understanding and have a personal relationship with God. And just get out your Bible, get down on your knees, just ask God to speak to you in dreams and visions. Ask God to confirm whether the truth of what you're saying and I'm saying is really true. And then ask God to kind of tell him what to do next. And literally, one step in the darkness at a time. Don't expect the whole series of answers to come flowing out and say, here's what you do, and you got 15 different steps. It'll be one step in the darkness at a time. And that's how we're going to have to get through this. One step in the darkness.
Well, unfortunately right now, the darkness is getting darker.
Well, that's when it gets also more light inside us.
Well, I hope so. What they're doing is taking away our freedom of speech, which leads to what? What have I always said? Freedom of thought. If you're afraid to speak it, you become afraid to think it. So they are engineering us into oblivion.
Well, you know what? Once you start to compress something, like you take blasting caps, you put them on a counter and blow them up, they're just a boom, and they just pop. But if you hold them in your hands, it'll blow your fingers off. So as they compress the people and freedom of speech, they increase the explosive power of intent, of the need for the desire for truth and righteousness, of the need and desire for repentance, of the notion that hope doesn't matter what you've done in the past, but what you can be in the future. So you don't have to die in a poisoned, radioactive world where money is just an instrument of death, which is what it's becoming, and a control. where the churches are just a means of mind control rather than a means of release of your spirit and soul to know what not only is this world, but the world of the next. And your true powers as a human being to not only intuitively know what other people need and want in other beings, living things and plants, but also to literally shape the future, to intend through scientific discovery, spiritual discovery, a whole new world where we're not just more technically advanced, but spiritually advanced,
Well,
where we become the masters of a new human race that deserves to travel the cosmos.
well, we don't now, and unless we get to where
That
you're
transition
talking
is
about.
coming. The birth, the pangs that we're about to go through,
Right.
is not the birth pangs of a demonic world run by Nephilim, but the birth pangs of a new civilization that will rise from the ashes of this current one.
All right, well, we're going to have a big fire first.
Yeah, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be more horrendous than anybody can imagine in their darkest nightmare.
It's worse than you
Only
think.
faith will get you through it.
Thank you, Bill. As always.
Take care, everybody. Pray.
Talk to you next
Because
week.
the darkness is getting darker, but the light inside us is getting brighter.
All right, very good. Thank you. Be well. Have a good week.
Take care.
Night.